What you're hearing is Hardie Fiber Cement Siding living up to its reputation as the siding that helps resist weather damage, no matter what Mother Nature throws its way. James Hardie knows how important a reputation is, especially when you're a home builder. That's why Hardie products withstand the elements better than wood-based siding, with styles to match their strength. Because when home builders work with us, we deliver our best so they can look their best. Protect your reputation with exterior products by James Hardie.
You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Great to be back today. And today we're going to be talking about reinvention of yourself, what you can do to reinvent yourself here in 2020, going into 2021. I cannot believe it that we are here on December 12th. I mean, the year is almost over. And I don't know about you, but if you are on Facebook, you get some of those updates that tell you about, hey, remember this that happened 1 year ago to the day? And it's very interesting. It's very enlightening. And it really put in perspective how fast this year went by. And I think that many of you can agree with me on this, that the year literally flew by, and it flew by being an interesting year that we've never experienced before. Something that we've never experienced before, something that we're not used to. And so I want to talk about what 2020 has taught many of us. I want to talk about isolationism. It's been brought to my attention by many viewers and many listeners that they are dealing with being isolated, dealing with loneliness, trying to figure out how to cope. And we're going to talk about that as well. Dan Nelson is joining us here later on in the hour, so we'll be having our history and historical perspective, which will be good to talk about as well, because it's always interesting to hear what happened in history, right? A lot of times we believe that, we didn't have craziness before, but we really actually did. So let's talk about this. First off, I want to talk about some of the ways to deal with isolation and how to deal with being lonely, because, loneliness can actually make us sick, it can make us depressed, it can make us upset, it can cause health issues. And I know that there's a lot of folks out there, many of you that are having to work from home. You've never worked from home before, and it's kind of a struggle. You haven't seen your coworkers, haven't seen your friends. Some of you are working in situations where you really can't be around other people. You're working in the hospitals, or you're working in a facility that helps with senior citizens or what have you, and you can't. Some of you are trying to choose to do the right thing because you're taking care of elderly family members. And there's a lot of different levels of this, and so you feel very isolated, very alone. And I get it. I went out the other night for dinner, and it's funny. I mean, I've had to go to work every day, but I haven't really done a lot of social interaction, and I've seen people here and there, but it was funny. I went out to dinner and I was walking up there to meet folks, and it was almost like I was so clumsy, I almost fell over myself because it was like a little bit of stress, because it wasn't stress about worried, it was just like I hadn't been out really to do stuff. And it really was interesting. Like I almost, I stepped on someone's foot trying to give them a hug and that sort of thing. It was kind of clumsy, but I've realized that a lot of us have just not been doing that social interaction. A lot of us have been staying to ourselves, and a lot of us have been feeling alone. So we'll be talking about things that you can do, because I think one of the biggest things that we have to realize is that fear is a big proponent of this. We can get very fearful, we can get very scared, we can get very overwhelmed about what's happening. We have to really watch out our intake of certain types of media. I professed this for the years on years, even before COVID was even anything, or at least wasn't in our news at the time. And it's very interesting because I've realized that fear is something that can really not only mentally impact us, but it can physically impact us. And so we need to really get in touch with our fears, and we need to kind of push ourselves to do what we need to do. So one of the things that I suggest is, getting outside, getting some exercise, doing what you need to do to have a healthy body, because that's very important. Because when we're not eating healthy or we're not taking care of ourselves, that stress level spikes. It becomes unruly. and it's something that we have to deal with. So we need to realize that a lot of times we can feel overwhelmed and stressed out when we don't take care of ourselves. So let's talk about the reinvention concept today, because I think that a lot of us are trying to reinvent our careers. A lot of us are trying to reinvent our relationships. A lot of us are trying to reinvent who we are. A lot of us are questioning our goals and our direction and what we want. And I think that right now, more than ever, is the time to be asking ourselves, who are we really, and what do we want in this lifetime? Because I think that many of us have realized that there was a lot of things that we were doing day in and day out that just were not what we wanted to be doing. I think that a lot of us realized that we were probably wasting some of our time doing things that were busy work. I think that some of us have realized that we did really like working at the office, and some of us are really realizing that we really do like working at home because we're able to do multiple things. We don't have that same hour or hour and a half drive to work, and we're able to use that time wisely. I've also realized that some of us are reinventing our careers. You know, some of our careers, unfortunately, have become under target or under siege because of COVID, whether it's because of people not wanting to go there or do that, or whether that industry has changed. You know, I've had some friends that are in the entertainment industry. I've had friends that are in the industry that puts on the big events and the big conferences, and their lives have changed dramatically because a lot of it's all virtual, right? Or they've canceled it till the following year. And so some of us have had to reinvent ourselves. Others of us are embarking on the reinvention because we want to, because we believe that it's time, because we realize that there's certain aspects of our life that we really, really enjoyed and certain things that we did not enjoy doing. And I understand that many of us have responsibilities. I do too. I have to work for a living, and I understand that. And so coming from that point of view, I understand that a lot of us have to do some things that maybe we don't always enjoy. But I think that we need to figure out what is it that we want to accomplish. Because I think that even if you are able to be out and about and you don't feel like you have to isolate and you're okay with the situation and you're doing all the precautions, I think, though, that the change in the way that our society came to such a halt really was a wake-up call for many of us to realize, wow, I mean, this could all happen in a moment's notice. You know, am I happy with where I am right now? Am I happy with what I've accomplished right now? Am I happy with where my family is? You know, what my kids are doing? Am I happy with what I'm creating as a legacy? Am I happy with what I'm spending all my time doing? And so, the first thing that I'd like y'all to think about is asking, what is some way in my life, what is something in my life, what is one angle of my life that I can begin to change or augment to allow myself to not only feel more powerful but independent, but also on point with who I am and what my values mean. And we really need to begin, before we can really reinvent ourselves, we have to begin by understanding what we stand for. Okay, that's a big deal. What do we stand for? Who are we? I mean, I know that a lot of us are married. We've been in relationships or been in a relationship for a long time or been married for a long time, whatever. And you know a lot about your spouse or your significant other, but when it comes to you, you kind of don't. And there's a lot of questions to who you are and what you believe in and what you want in your life. And I think that this is very important for us to look at. It's very important for us to analyze. It's very important for us to understand. Because I believe that many of us have made choices on family, on career, based on what our parents told us or what we believe society wanted us to do or what we believe we needed to do at the time. And I think many of us are questioning a lot of that old perception, because I think that we're questioning it because we're beginning to realize that there's more depth to our lives than just doing what we think we need to do. And I think that some of us had the rug pulled out from underneath us because, we had this whole thing set up, this whole life where we were extremely busy and working really hard and just going through the motions, and then all of a sudden there was kind of a halt, and it made us focus on all this other stuff that's going on in our life, and it made us see the family dynamic as it is, and it made us see the marriage as it is, and it made us see our career as it is, and it really opened our lives to who we are and being more aware of what is missing in our life. And I am very much for gratitude. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting there saying, oh, we got to look at what's wrong, what's missing, we got to find fault. It's not like that. It's just like we do need to figure out, though, what is it that we feel is missing? What is it that we feel we need to take care of? What is it that we feel is something that just has not been created in our life? What is a goal, a desire, a project? What has not come to fruition that you believe needs to be done? And last week when we did the show was actually preempted because of Notre Dame football, but we still did the show on social media. And we were talking about one thing. What is one thing that you can do right now? And the show is up on all social media and on my YouTube channel. If you missed just the digital show last week, you just go to Ashley Burgess, put in Ashley Berges on YouTube. You can find it, bam, right there. You can find it on Facebook. And it's like, what is one thing that you can do? What's one thing that you can do to create value coming out of this year? Because I don't want to define any year of mine as not being a good year. I think that's crazy. It's asinine. And I found that 2020, even though people they're talking about it as being the new cuss word, right? I really think that it really was an awakening for many of us to understand, freedoms, lack thereof, changes in society, but also the awakening that we need to start focusing on who we are, what we stand for, and what can we do to empower ourselves. Empowerment of us, empowerment of the individual. How do you create that? No one else is going to help us. It's not like other people are going to come out and find empowering and make us empowered. We have to empower ourselves. This is what this show is about. It's about empowerment. It's about education. It's about fun. It's about entertainment. But all in all, it's about helping you to live an easier, more fulfilling life. It's not a fear-based media here. It's about helping you to understand what you can do to gain that control back and be more empowered. So we're going to be talking about this in today's show. So think about it. We're going to think about things that you can do to feel more empowered. Things that you can do to feel less isolated, okay? Things that you can do to create what you want on this planet. We don't have to keep going through the motions. We don't have to keep doing what we think we have to do. I want you to start thinking about this. I want you to open your mind up right now, and I want you to allow yourself to do what you want to do. I want to allow yourself to dream, to think, to allow yourself to create. Okay, for this moment in time, let's begin to think about what is your creation? What do you want to do? And how do you want to inspire others to do the same? Okay? We got a great show for you coming up. It's going to be great. Stay with us. Dan Nelson's going to be here later on in the hour. And you know what? We're going to be talking about empowerment. We're going to talk about inspiration. We're going to be talking about creation and how to be able to do what you need to do. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. How are you doing? We're back today And it's interesting because we're talking about empowerment. We're talking about opening your mind to doing things that you want to do in your life, figuring out what that looks like, inspiring others, creating. And one of the things that I've realized is that a lot of times when we're under stress and anxiety, we don't open our mind. We don't think about things that we could do. We don't open the mind to what we want. We don't think about those things. And so it's like, what do we want to do? What do we want to create? And I think it's powerful when we actually start journaling, and we start creating thought, and we start creating direction for what we want. And I find that powerful. I find that interesting, and I find that it's an interesting situation to be in when we actually have the ability to do what we want. And it's an interesting time. It's an interesting place to be because we're trying to figure out what is it that I want to create, what are the things that are lacking in my life, and what can I do to better myself? What can I do to create this reality that I want? What can I do to create what I want to create in my life? And how do I succeed in doing it? How do I create it? And I find that we have to peruse it. We have to think about it. We have to open our thoughts. We have to open our mind. We have to figure out what it is that we want to do. We have to realize what we're focusing on. We have to realize on what we want to do in our life. And I think one of the biggest things is that we have to create some goals as to what we want. We have to create some goals as to what we want and what we're needing in our day-to-day life. And those things are important in its own. And so what are some things that are lacking in your life? What are some things that are lacking right now when it comes to things that you've always wanted? What are some things that you've wanted to have in your life, but you haven't attained it? What are some things that you've always thought about? And I find that these are the things that we need to think about in our life. These are the things that we need to figure out what is going on. These are the things that we need to open up our mind and focus on what it is that we want. And I feel that right now, more than ever, we need to start focusing on ourselves. And I'm not trying to make people into being narcissists. I'm not trying to make you into a narcissist. I'm not trying to make you into something that you're not. What I am trying to say, though, is I want you to start focusing on you. I've realized that many of us are focusing on what the family's doing, what your husband's doing, what your wife is doing, all this stuff, how to make their lives different. But we're not focusing on how to create that happiness in our own life. How to create stuff in our own life is to do what we need to do. And I think that that's the powerful position. That's where we need to be at. That's where we have to figure out, the big kahuna of stuff. What is that we need to do to actually maximize our time on this planet? And I think that a lot of us are wondering, okay, so I've done this and I've created that and I've worked really hard on that. I know that some of you are tired. You're like, I'm tired. I've worked really hard, but I know that there's something left that you want to do, more that you want to do. And we have to really focus our energy on how to create that reality. We have to focus our energy on how we can create that reality. And that's what's so powerful. But we have to be open to things that we might not have been open to. We have to be open to things that we might not have been open to, or we need to go back to the things that we've always wanted to do that we never took time to do it. We got to go back to the things that we've always wanted to do that we never thought we could, or we had those false narratives in our head that we would never be good at it. Like, I don't know. It's just, we have to think about that, because sometimes we create these false narratives, which actually mean that we can do this, we can create that, we can be that, and we should. So stay tuned. We'll be talking about how you can do that. We're having a couple of technical difficulties on the air right now, but live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Okay, we're talking about empowerment. We're talking about things you can do to change your trajectory. We're talking about things that you can do to actually, better your life. Things that you can do to actually inspire yourself. And I'd love you to be able to just focus on that for right now. Because I know that a lot of you have been carrying around the burden of fear and anxiety, what's going to happen. I think that a lot of you have been carrying around the burden and fear of the family dynamic and how they're going to react or how they're going to deal with things. I think that many of us have been going through the stress and anxiety of what's happening in our world. And I think that, we need to really focus on, one, we've got to take care of ourselves. Two, remembering that if you are feeling lonely and you are feeling isolated, we've got to move out of that isolationism, because that's going to cause us to have depression. That's going to cause us to feel even more overwhelmed. And if you are in that position right now, I want you to really focus on the fact that we need to, turn off that media for a bit. We need to get some outdoor exercise. We need to start focusing on eating well and taking care of ourselves. We also need to maybe be aware of self-medicating and how self-medicating can really put us in a funk. Like remembering that alcohol is a downer, understanding that, marijuana is a downer, understanding that we have to be very careful about self-medicating and being aware of that, because that's going to what? That's going to impact us even more. It's going to make the situation even more stressful because it's going to play upon our fears. And I want you to think about that, because I want us to all realize that I want you to be as successful as others. I want us all to be playing on the same field. It's not fair for someone not to have the information and knowledge to make their life powerful. I want to talk real quick before we move into Dan Nelson's segment on our historical perspective. I want to talk real quick about what I'd like to call false narratives. We're putting up a video here in the next few hours about false narratives. Many of us are dealing with false narratives in our life. Many of us are dealing with false narratives because of a family member or a spouse is telling us those false narratives and we're believing it. But some of us are actually creating our own false narratives in our head. We're creating the false narratives that we can't do something, or we're never going to be successful, or these things are not going to happen for us. So I just want you to take the time right now to ask yourself, what am I fearful of? What are some things that I want to accomplish, but why am I so scared? Why am I scared to do it? Why am I fearful? What is in my way of doing it? And by the way, failure is nothing. I mean, to me, failure, the only way you fail is if you don't try. Okay, people have failed millions and millions of times as some of the most successful people on the planet. But we have to be okay with that type of failure. We have to be okay, because that's not really failure, is it? It's not at all. That actually is, what is it? It's actually determination to get up and do it again. Do something again. But when we don't try it, what is in our way? And I think that many of us have realized that there's some things that we haven't done. We've realized that life can change on a dime, and I don't want to see you have regret. I want you to think about what is that you want to do. I mean, I'm embarking on some stuff right now, and you know how I am, and I talked about this last week on the digital show when we were preempted because of football. I talked about, I was starting to work on some projects that I had put on the back burner for years. Actually, one project that I've put on the back burner for 7 years. I started it 7 years ago, and I didn't get back around to it. I wanted to, but I just had so much on my plate. But I'm doing it, and when it's all done, I'll unveil it. But that's the thing, is that I'm working toward it now to make that a reality. And so I ask you, what is something that you've put on the back burner for years that you're ready to try? What are some things that you put on the back burner that you're ready to try, that you want to try, that you want to do? Ask yourself those questions. So right now, I want to take a walk down history. I want to talk about the historical perspective, and I think that it's time to. Dan Nelson's joined us here on Live Your True Life Perspectives, socially distancing ourselves, calling into the show. Dan, how's your day going today?
Doing good. It's a nice day outside. Just got back from a walk.
Nice. So you got some exercise. You went outside. You're making sure to take care of those things that matter.
Yep. Well, this time of year, anytime you get nice enough weather to walk in, you want to do it because the next day could be weather you wouldn't want to walk in.
That's so true. That's so true. So, what do you have for us today as far as our historical perspective is concerned? I know that it's kind of nice for us to walk down into the past for a little bit and kind of forget what's happening now, but also to realize that the past was not always a bed of roses.
No, it wasn't always a bed of roses. This is a more of an inspirational story, and I ran across it working on a client that had called into your show or listens to your show, and they'd reached out to me to get some work done in their family. And one of their family members was a gal named Maydell, and it was a big to-do in the family because she was a starlet, because she happened to be Billy Mitchell's secretary, General Billy Mitchell, who was the Army captain that said we should have a separate Air Force. He promoted the Air Force. Of course, those were already in the Army, weren't too happy about it. And so they made a movie called The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell. And they asked her to play the part of Billy Mitchell's secretary. So she got to, in a movie, her one and only movie, play the role she had in real life. And so there was a picture in the newspaper of her with Gary Cooper, who played Billy Mitchell. So, you can imagine this was a big deal in the family. Well, in one of these newspaper articles, it mentions, and their relationships, her maiden name was Stinson, was the Flying Stinsons. I'm like, well, who the heck's the Flying Stinsons? I'm already thinking, okay, we got Billy Mitchell flying. What's the connection here? So it turned out this Flying Stinson family was really unique, and I was really excited to stumble upon them. So it was three siblings, two sisters and a brother, who were very early aviators. So the oldest sibling was a gal named Catherine, and at age 21, she planned to get her certificate and use the money from doing flying exhibitions to pay for her music lessons. But she found out she liked flying so much that she gave up her piano career and decided to become an aviator. So she went to St. Louis in 1911 to take lessons from a guy named Tony Janis, who only allowed her to fly as a passenger. And then there's actually this pretty cool picture in 1912 of her with Wilbur Wright, as in the Wright brothers. They weren't flying together, but they were about to refuel an aircraft. But she didn't get her license before he died in May of 1912. But just the fact that, he saw this young lady, in preparation for being an early pilot. So then she took lessons from a guy named Max Lilly, who first refused to give her lessons, but then after letting her fly for 4 hours, he said, "You're good, you're on your own." So I guess she was pretty good. And she went on the exhibition circuit because this is a big deal. Flying was a big deal, nevertheless, a female pilot. And she would tell paper reporters that she was 21, but they decided she was 16, and they called her the flying schoolgirl. I guess she looked young. So she got her certificate, and the family moved to San Antonio, which I didn't know this, but I guess San Antonio is one of the best places to fly in the United States. Probably why there's at one point, I think it was 5 Air Force bases down there. Certainly no mountains to run into. And she ended up becoming sort of this really famous woman, a stunt pilot. She was the first woman to perform up in the air, and then she did that 500 times without a single accident. So she had a lot of courage. And then she was one of the first women allowed to carry airmail, and she also made the second airmail flight in Canada. And then she flew, this doesn't sound like a big deal now, this is 1 hour on Southwest, but in 1917 she flew 606 miles from San Diego to San Francisco, setting a new American nonstop distance record. So this was all before Charles Lindbergh, Spirit of St. Louis, and all that. Unfortunately, when she was serving in World War I as an ambulance driver, she got the flu. Sound familiar? And damaged her lungs. So that was sort of the end of her aviation career. And then she had a brother named Eddie Stinson, and he took after her, and he was a test pilot too. And he flew over 16,000 hours, which if you think about that, he was less than 40. That's like being airborne for 2 years solid. Unfortunately, he did crash in 1932 and died, and that was sort of the end of Stinson Aircraft, which was actually a pretty famous aircraft company at one time, and had built aircraft. And then the last sibling was the youngest, Marjorie, and she was the ninth person to get the Fédération Aéronautile, probably not saying that right, international license in France. And she was the first female airmail pilot in the United States. And she taught at the Stinson School of Flying in San Antonio that was established by her mother. And if there's anybody on here from San Antonio, they might recognize Field, and that's named after their family. And she was actually the Royal Flying Corps out of Canada sent their students to San Antonio to the Stinson School to learn how to fly there. And just a last couple things here. In 1914, her and her sister, Catherine, flew with the yellow Votes for Women banner on the back of their right biplane on Suffrage Day in Chicago, and they managed to raise $50,000 for the suffragette campaign. So not only were they pioneer women, they were also trying to make things better for other women.
That's awesome. Wow, what a history. That's pretty cool. And
yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, I'd never heard of them before. You know, you always hear of like Amelia Earhart, who, you know, the people that crash always are more known or disappear. But the two sisters, they never crashed. You know, they lived long lives and accomplished a lot for flying and for women.
That's interesting. Yeah, and it's a great story for women for sure. It's like we need more of those. You know, empowering and inspiring. You know, inspiring not only women but inspiring little girls, inspiring children that they can do whatever they want to do. You know, if they put their mind to it and their belief to it.
Yeah, it was actually sort of funny how this tied together because I was going to share this story last week, and last week was sort of a famous day because the kicker for Notre Dame. That gal, that was the first time in the Power 5 conference that you had a female player. And I thought, well, how funny is that the same day that I'm going to share this story about a young female going out and breaking barriers. So unfortunately, that game preempted us, but it's still, within a week's time here, you sort of had another female breaking a barrier that hadn't been broken before.
That's powerful stuff, Dan. And it's neat because that actually relates to one of our listeners' family trees, right?
It does. Yeah, she's got Stinsons in her family tree.
Neat. Yeah, see, those are the things that you can find out. See, that's what's so neat. And that's one of the things that I think can also help, with creating some sense of family and removing some of that sense of isolation is to find out some of that information, to peruse that information. And Dan's the man to make that happen. Dan, inspiring story, by the way. We're not preempted next week, so I'm sure that you're going to supply another inspiring story for us as well, right?
I will. I've got several on the shelf there, sort of waiting to decide which is the right one. You know, when I can tie them into current events, it's always a little more fun.
Yeah, it's very powerful stuff. Well, Dan, I look forward to speaking with you next week and to hearing your story, and I appreciate your historical perspective.
Thank you, Ashley. I look forward to next week as well.
Awesome. Dan's story, I think, was so inspiring, and I think for all women out there, for all children out there, for everybody out there, it's not about a man-woman thing. It's about us. It's about us coming together, collectively coming together to create the world that we want to live in, to create a world where people feel as though they can live their dreams. I know that we have responsibilities. I know that we have to create that type of structure, but at the same time, we have to find a place to start living some of the things that we want to do, even if it's small, even if we have to start small. We don't want to have regret in our life, and I think that some of these stories allow us to see the value, allows us to see what we can do, allows us to understand what we can actually create. And I know that many of us are not going to be able to be like pilots or fighter pilots or any of that stuff right now, but the idea that is a possibility, the idea that everything that we want to do is a possibility, but we have to limit ourselves from the negative thought process. We have to recognize our false narratives that we create. We have to realize the false narratives that other people have created for us, and we have to really dig into our conscious and subconscious and figure out what are some of the things that are self-sabotaging me. What are those things that are self-sabotaging you, that get in the way of you creating the reality that you want, that get in the way of you having that day-to-day life that you want to create, having what you want, determining that, keeping that determination to do it, because I've realized that we can hurt ourselves more than anybody else can. We know the buttons to push. We know how to mess with ourselves. We know how to hurt ourselves. We know how to put ourselves down. We know how to scare ourselves. And we know how to put fear into ourselves. And so I want you to begin to analyze that. Is there fear that's in your life that wasn't there before? We need to analyze that fear. Where is the fear coming from? Is it coming from internal? Is it coming from an outside source? If it's coming from an outside source, how do we limit the intake of ourselves in that outside source? If it's coming from internal, where is that latching from and triggering from our programming, okay? These are things that we have to think about, guys. These are things that we have to think about, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll get to the bottom of it and create understanding, structure, compassion, but also inspiration. That's part of it. So stay tuned. We got more for you. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess. Will be back, and I'll be back this time in 2 shades.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Yes, we're back. I love Dan's historical perspective because it really puts things into perspective, right? I mean, we really can do anything we want to do. We just gotta kind of take our sabotage out of the way. We just got to put our mind to it. We hear people say we got to put our mind to it. But what if our mind is full of false narratives? What if our mind is full of negative thought processes about ourselves? What if our mind is directly connected to the self-sabotage? When we put our mind to something, it's not going to work. When we put our mind to something, it's going to ramrod it. It's going to monkey wrench it. Whatever word you want to talk, bamboozle it. It's all going to happen. So how do we do that? How do we begin to do this? And I think the first thing that we want to do here to reinvent ourselves 2020, 2021 is to ask ourselves, what are the things that we want to accomplish? What is something that I can accomplish right now? And then when I'm trying to accomplish it and I find myself self-sabotaging it, how do I overcome the self-sabotage? What are the triggers in my mind that create the self-sabotage that make me stop doing what I want to do? Okay, because the self-sabotage is real. Okay, this is real. And, if you are entertaining and dealing with self-sabotage, we've got to check it. Why are you self-sabotaging? What are the reasons for it? If there are false narratives, we have a video coming out here in just a few hours on false narratives. But these false narratives dealing with, the false narratives that your spouse or significant other is telling you and how we fall prey into believing that it's true based on how we were raised, right? Because that's real. If we hear a false narrative that's similar to another false narrative that we heard in our formative years, it's going to feel very normal, natural, normal. So what do we do? How do we work that? How do we get past that? We have to not believe the false narrative. We have to work to get in there to realize, where did I start beginning to believe this false narrative? When did this become my acceptance of reality? Because our reality can be anything. It can be any sort of, it can be anything. It just depends on what we believe in. Reality is subjective. Art is subjective. Life is subjective. When you tell somebody about something and you try to explain something, isn't it interesting how their vision and version of it is completely different from yours? Isn't that interesting how we try to understand other people in our life? And we try to understand what they're thinking, but yet we don't try to understand what we think. We don't try to understand where we're feeling or what we're focusing on. We find ourselves trying to figure out what everybody else thinks, but we don't put any stock into how we feel or how we think or how we see the world. And isn't it interesting how every single person on the planet sees the world differently? You might have some people that see the world similar to you, they don't see it the same way. And some people that you come into contact with that see it very differently, almost the opposite. And sometimes you can tell somebody something very positive and they can hear something extremely negative. And you know where that comes from? That comes from our own brain. That comes from what we're used to hearing. That comes from our past, our experiences. We color what we hear. We color what we see. So I ask you to begin to step back and analyze, is there something that's standing in the way of reinventing yourself? Are you ready? We all can pivot and reinvent ourselves right now, making small incremental changes, whether it's to end self-sabotage slowly but surely, whether it's to stop the self-sabotaging behavior, whether it's to begin to create something we've always wanted to create or have a goal that we've always wanted to follow. It's up to you. You have the power. It's up to you. And I believe in you, and I know that you can do whatever you want to do. We just got to get out of our own way. If you haven't already, check out my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and put in Ashley Burgess. Ashley, Berges. You can also follow me on Facebook under Ashley Burgess or on Twitter as well. And I look forward to hearing any comments that you may have about the show. If you'd like to bring the show into your city, around the country, you just reach out. You can go to ashleyburgess.com. ashleyburgess.com. Click on that contact page where we have everything up that you'll need to reach out and get that show on a station around you. But in the meantime, it's about you. It's about eliminating those false narratives that you've created in your own mind. It's about realizing that the self-sabotage is triggered by our belief that we are not good enough, or we're scared of success, or we're scared of actually finding our true self. I look forward to seeing you next week live here on the show. And in the meantime, I want you to be healthy and happy and do something. Take yourself out of your comfort zone just a little bit and live your true life perspectives. With me, your host, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time. And 3 shakes.